Welcome back to the Make a Baby podcast. This is episode 137. Today, I want to put a little disclaimer on this episode, and we are going to be talking about potentially uncomfortable topics such as abortion. And if that is not what you want to hear today, feel free to skip this episode. Episode 137, What to Know About Conceiving After an Abortion with Renee. Christine, I am so in love with you. I am so glad you're here. I know that I was on your podcast last week, and I'm super excited that you're here today. And I just feel so connected to you, and I'm super honored that you're here to share your story. And I know it's going to impact so many of our listeners. How are you doing?
Thanks for having me. I'm doing great. I'm looking forward to having this really dynamic, real conversation. Because I think we have to remember, this is so many women in our world that just because we're talking about a taboo topic doesn't mean that it's not an important one.
Absolutely. So I want to start this conversation of who are you? What do you do? Because I want you to put it in your own words to share with our listeners.
Yeah. So I'm Renee. I am a single mom of 2 kiddos. I live in Bozeman, Montana, and I am a shamanic Reiki practitioner and trainer, as well as Reiki coach. I'm also seen as a chakra expert. I really love diving into the lens of healing through the chakras healing. My main goal in this world is to spread the message of Reiki, to know that people do have access to healing, that it doesn't have to look like what we normally see in Western medicine, and that we're all spiritual beings having a spiritual experience in this human body. And how can we begin to heal our limiting beliefs, our limiting behaviors and self-sabotaging patterns so that we can fully, authentically live our truest self. And so I love playing in the Reiki space. I also have a background in women's health. I actually trained at a birth center for my Reiki training. So it was really cool. And I was young, I was 20 years old when I started my Reiki journey. My dad was doing Reiki when I was a kid, and he planted those seeds. And then
I love that so much.
Right? Isn't that cool? So, and then I studied at a birth center, and it turned out that most of the midwives were Reiki practitioners. And one of my co-student midwives was a Reiki teacher. And so she taught me at a birth center. And part of that was connecting with spirit babies and helping moms in their spiritual transition through labor and all of those things. So I have a big heart for the birthing community, for the birthing world, and the struggles to get there. So thank you so much for having me on.
Of course. And where did you grow up? I'm just curious. Where was this magical place where all these midwives were Reiki attuned?
I was born and raised in Portland, Oregon. And then the midwifery center I was working at was actually in Juneau, Alaska.
You have the wildest, amazing story. Those are so you're in Montana and the Pacific Northwest and then Alaska.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, and it was
super
really
intriguing.
Fortunate to grow up in a very progressive town. I went to a Catholic church that spoke 28 different languages. And one of my very first earliest memory was my dad asking our priest if he could have permission to do Reiki, and witnessing that conversation and him getting the permission to do it. And so that was kind of my foundation. And so when I became an adult, I was oh, I'm so going to learn this. As soon as it was reintroduced to me, I was yes, I want to know. And that kind of my early story, when I started stepping into myself as a healer, I was always very intuitive. I was always very clairaudient. So me coming into sanctuary space, because that was what my reference point was, always communicating with spirits and statues and saints and Mary and all the things. And so it wasn't until I was older that I kind of left the religion behind and stepped fully into spirituality and all that it represents, and felt like such a better match for me personally. And it's always been part of my life. I've always kind of been in it, right?
I love that so much. So let's talk about your story of motherhood and conceiving your babies, and tell us about where is that
in there? Yeah. So I have been married twice and I've been divorced twice. So I think I want to preface this conversation of, this has been my journey. I feel like in today's day and age, it feels like we have multiple lifetimes all crammed into one lifetime.
That's so true. That's what,
right?
definitely what it feels like.
It feels like it. And so these are phases of my life, right? So my first phase was I left that birth center and I got involved in a relationship that really wasn't for my highest good. And I very much felt
As so
like
many
I
of us
was
do.
right. And so it was really like I couldn't
Were you
leave
in
the
your
apartment.
20s?
I was in my 20s, right? This is like this 20 naive thing to do.
That is such a 20s thing to do. Like, isn't that what your 20s are for, unfortunately? Like, yes.
Here's the
Keep going.
caveat. My experience was like I was dating people about twice my age. Hello, daddy issues, right?
Oh,
Right. So I left Alaska. I was young. I was 21 years old. I got involved in this relationship and it felt very restrictive. And I finally found my way out, only to step into a very slightly less restrictive relationship.
okay.
So, and that was my first husband. And so, but when I met him, I could feel his energy and I could feel that it was meant to be there. I was meant to be with him. I tell my son all the time, like, I knew you were there. I knew that I was meeting the man of who I was going to have a child with. I never thought he was my soulmate. I never thought that I was going to spend my rest of my life with him. I met him and I go, I'm going to have your child. Like, I just knew that. I could so feel it intensely. And this was someone 18 years my senior. So it was like,
I feel like it's super important to highlight, like, families, and I think so much to unpack here. But like a point that I want to say is that it is very possible, like, that your journey to motherhood is not going to look cookie cutter or to what societal standards are. I
absolutely not.
imagine that a man 18 years your senior, any elder in your life probably would have frowned upon that or had certain comments about it, I'm sure. But I think it's important that this is just like as an aspect of your journey, how you come to, have your babies is very unique to you, and that's perfectly okay. And I love how, like, you are such a special soul because it takes a lot of practice, honesty, and work to be self aware or attuned or receive messages with such clarity at such a young age.
And it felt very much like spirit, whether it was my spirit baby or spirit in general, they had a plan. They totally had a plan. And so they threw a blanket of naivety and that passion and loveness over me, even though there was red flags everywhere. Everyone in my circle could see the red flags, but I couldn't because this spirit child needed to come through. And that's what it felt like. So as soon as he was born, it was like that veil cleared. And I was like, oh my God, what the hell am I doing?
And that was your first baby?
And that was my first baby. So after we got together, we were engaged within 5 days, which is also like not normal. It was all these just that spirit
Is it
blinding
love
me.
bombing?
It was totally love bombing. It was like I moved in right away. I was there. And I came out of this more emotionally abusive relationship to a lesser one. So I thought I had freedom
So you
because we
leveled
were,
up in your head.
yeah,
You're like, oh,
yeah.
this is better. I
No,
did
this
this.
is
Look at
better.
this. Like, you pat on the back. Yeah. It's not as bad as that one. I really did it. Oh, good job. Yeah,
Yeah.
I know. I did that
Right.
too.
Right. Well, so many of us
Yeah.
do. And
Yeah.
in this case, it was like he acted like he was in his 20s, like he was going out to shows. And he was like, you don't have to ask me for permission because my previous relationship always needed to ask permission, even to go to the bathroom. It was ridiculous. Right. So this felt like, oh, this is it. I'm going to get married. I'm going to have his baby. And it was just this veil of naivety that had fallen over me, this veil of that passionate love, that young love. So we ended up moving to Montana. That's how I ended up in Montana. He was in graduate school for his PhD. And so he was still very much in the student life, which is where I was in my life at the time. And I ended up getting pregnant and it freaked him out. Like he was not ready. I was probably more emotionally ready because when I met him, I was like, oh, I'm having this guy's baby. Like that was what my soul
You are
knew.
primed by spirit.
I was like, yeah, okay, this is what's happening. But I got pregnant and we weren't ready. We weren't financially ready. And what it seemed like, at least at the time, was that he needed it to kind of be by the book. We needed to get married and then have a kid and get the house and da da da. Right. And I was just open. Right. And I was just open and ready to bring this baby through. So I got pregnant and he wasn't. And it didn't feel like the right timing because he couldn't wrap his brain around it. And we didn't have like any finances at all. Like we were poor. Right. So I meditated and I spoke to my baby and I was just like, Mama says, not right now. This is not the right time. I love you. I want you. But Mama says, this isn't the right time yet. It's not right now. And it was more of like a gentle acceptance of like, okay, but I'm coming back.
Okay.
Right. So that's what led me into having a medical abortion. And so I couldn't pull it off at that time. I needed more time with this man to have it come through easier. And so the medical abortion was early. I mean, I was very clear from very early on that it was like, Mama says not yet. And so with a medical abortion, you're doing it at home. And the way that you need to do it, if you do a medical abortion early enough, it was okay. But it really scarred my first husband. Like, he was more damaged than I was. Like, after that, the sex life was gone. There was no intimacy. He was broken by that abortion, which didn't make a lot of sense because he didn't want me to be pregnant. But the abortion and seeing me in that much pain and doing it in the house and not a clinical setting where I was watched over by other people really hurt him. And so it was one of the first things that was like, this relationship can't work long term because he's no longer can be intimate with me. And so it was very interesting because it was like he moved forward going, we need to get married. We need to buy the house. We need to do all of these things. But he wouldn't get close anymore. He was scared to get me pregnant. Right. And so we were actually at a music show. Like, that was our thing. He loved going to bluegrass shows and music concerts and
bluegrass.
festivals. Right. And therefore he acted a lot younger than he was. And so we were at a show and he had a lot of friends who were in the big name bands. And so we were always in the backstage or VIP passes or whatever it was. And I never felt comfortable there. I didn't want to mingle with the people on stage. That was not my scene, but he did. So there was one big music festival and I went back to the room. I was like, I'm done. I don't need to be out all night. Well, he ended up getting drunk with like the main star of whatever band it was. And the guy was just like, just go get her pregnant. Just go do it. And that was his message to him. And because he was intoxicated, he let that fall. And we probably had gotten married maybe 2 months prior. Like everything happened really fast. So we had gotten married and then he came back to the room intoxicated. And I was like, well, he hasn't touched me in months. Okay. And I was like, I'm ovulating. And he came into the room and said, let's make a baby.
So let's do it. Game on.
Game on. Okay, here we go. No surprises. I got your consent. Like, I'm telling you straight up. And I think part of it for me is I kind of knew in my heart of hearts, like, I'm fertile. I feel fertile. I've always felt fertile. Like, even now I've got
That's
a lot
a
of
powerful thing to say. I feel fertile.
I'm so fertile. Like, even at 41 right now, I'm like, I am fertile. If someone touches me, I'm going to get pregnant. I'm terrified of getting pregnant now, right? But
oh, me too. I never want to be pregnant again. I love helping people get pregnant, and I love Reiki babies, but I am so done having babies.
Yeah, right?
So done.
And it's okay.
It's okay.
Right. And
I love helping people achieve their dreams because that's what I'm made for.
Right. Right. Exactly. So it went very from this, okay, we had the abortion. Things got really rocky because there was no intimacy left in our marriage and our partnership. We had a wedding. I mean, there was still red flags everywhere. There was red flags everywhere. Then we went off to this music festival. I got pregnant really easily. And I was like, okay, I'm doing this. I'm not having another abortion. And so we move forward. I think he was in a bit of shock. I was like, remember, you knew. I told you. And so I conceived. And then in the pregnancy, I was able to kind of tune into this child. And I just remember having this one profound, I wanted to know what the sex of my baby was. And for my own babies, I don't do this for other people, but for my own babies, I was always able to tell what their name was, who they were, what their personality was like. And so I was sitting in meditation trying to connect with my spirit baby. And I was like, who are you? Like, just give me the basics. And this foreign language came through. Like, it didn't even sound like it was an earth language. And so I was hearing these words that I did not understand. And then it translated into English. And it was like, I am Zachariah and you shall call me Zach. And I was like, oh my goodness, what am I getting myself into?
Zachariah. Wow.
I was like, okay, all right. And so Zachariah was born and we call him Zach. And part of it was like, when I got the name, I was like, this is what we're naming our child. Like, you don't have an opinion. Like, this is going to be his first name. Feel free to do whatever you want with his middle name, but I am choosing his first name. This is who he is. And
how was that received?
There was things I just needed to put my foot down on. And when I wouldn't back down, like same thing with circumcision. He wanted to get him circumcised. I'm like, I'm going to divorce you as soon as this baby is born if you circumcise him, period. I'm not doing it. Like, there were certain things I was very clear on from my medical background, from my women's health background, my midwifery background. Right. And so there's certain things I just wouldn't waver on. But as soon as I put on the cloak of motherhood, my personality changed. As soon as my purpose was to care for this child, no longer did I want to go to music festivals. No longer did I want to be a party girl. No longer did I want to be irresponsible. It was like, time to level up. I got to feed the baby. I got to take care of this baby. We got to survive. This is what needs to be happen. You need to get a job. Like, we need stability in our lives. We need root chakra. Hello. Right? And because this child was being born, like, it put everything into focus for me. And so he was like, okay, we have to buy the house. And I'm like, I don't need to buy a house. I need a house. But he was pretty like, we have to buy a house. And I'm like, and I'm just pregnant and I'm just blinded. But once that baby came through, like once we had the baby, and the birth was really easy too. And part of it is that I had seen probably 75, almost 100 births by that point, maybe 60 births by that point. So, and most of them were out of hospital births. And so the birthing never scared me. That was all very normal. Like, my midwife didn't even show up for my birth. I had a backup midwife to come in the last hour just so I had someone there.
I can relate to that. I was scared of birth, but I was never scared of motherhood.
Yeah.
I was like, I can totally be a kick-ass mom. Mm-hmm. But it was the like mechanics of maybe like bathing and birthing. That's where I got hung up on.
Yeah. We all have those like things that we need to reflect on. Like, what part of this is scary? What part of this? And for me, it was like, oh, he can't be there. Like, I didn't want my partner there. So my midwife was like, I don't know if I can handle him in the room. If he's in the room, I might not be able to give birth, because he just didn't know how to have a soft side. And so it was too gruff. And I was like, I don't know if he's going to be able to handle this. So my midwife, my personal midwife, was very protective of me, because she could see how toxic the relationship was and how demeaning he was to me, and just emotionally abusive. So the midwife was always kind of stood in between us in a way, and energetically. And so when she couldn't make it, and we had this granny midwife show up from like 2 towns over, like an hour and a half away.
These grannies don't play.
Grannies don't play, but the granny pulled up in like a freaking RV, and she's from, right? You know, like,
this is the best story I've ever heard.
She was so funny. Like, she came in with her little bags, and because she was a no nonsense, like Southern girl, my husband could handle that, because he's from the South too. And there was no judgment over her behavior. And so having that other midwife, like, all of it felt very much like staged out by divine. Like, I got the midwife I needed for the actual birth. I got the supportive midwife I needed during the pregnancy. But this random chick showed, like, I mean,
known all of that. You couldn't have known how it would all come together at the end.
Right. Well, and I think that's why we have to trust what all is happening.
Trust 100%.
I can look back and it all makes sense now. But in the moment, I was like, oh my God, my midwife's not showing up.
Right.
And then at the end, I was like, I needed that exact midwife with that personality. She was a perfect person to be there, because she could handle my husband, and he was going to tone it down because they didn't know each other. And so had the baby.
I think there's something also when like you have like very strong men that maybe are not emotionally safe, or they're emotionally disruptive. There's something about a no nonsense older woman that they just don't fuck with very much. Like, right. They just like, oh, I can't bite that one. Or if I bark, she's going to bite back. Yeah. I have found that experience. Like when my dad, like, there was this certain like women in our lives that he just wouldn't fuck with. But like, he would definitely like piss around with my mom and try to torment her. But like when it came to like older women that were in our circles, he was a totally different behavior.
Yeah. Yeah. And so for me, it was a blessing. I was like, yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And
And so with that birth, would you say so you got your baby. What was your birth experience like though? Did you feel satisfied with that birth? What did you walk away with feeling?
yeah, I mean, luckily in my family, we have easy births. We have very high pain tolerance. I feel like I'm giving your audience a very unique story.
No, because when people describe their families, they don't usually say high pain tolerance. Or I think you have such a unique story because one, I think it's very unusual. Like, there's very few people that grow up with Reiki as a normal thing in their household. Usually, Reiki is something, if I do encounter, oh, yeah, I'm Reiki attuned, it's something they did in yoga training, or they did in passing, or they did it as part of their spiritual awakening. And it's something they did over a weekend. It's not like a lifestyle, it's not an adoption into their life that is a core pillar in how they live their lives, like you and I do, let alone being self aware, having psychic abilities to communicate with babies, let alone like, oh, yeah, my family has high pain tolerance. Like, I can tell you, my family has abusive, addictive patterns. Like, so, like, more obvious things. So, I think that this is probably one of the best interviews I've ever done. So, keep going. Thank you for sharing because it's so unique, but it's so amazing to hear because there's so many aspects. Like, this is a real story. You're a real person. And I want to know, so what did you walk away with your birth? So, you had high pain tolerance.
So basically, I had woken up at like 1 a.m, having regular contractions, and called my midwife. She's like, I'm at another birth. Can you go back to sleep? Let me think about that. I'll give it a try. Right?
Can you go
Because,
back to sleep?
first time moms. But here's a trick. Back in high school, I had major jaw issues and I needed jaw surgery. And my way of coping with the pain was to fall asleep. So I had trained myself to, when I feel pain, I just sleep through it. So I did. I went back to sleep. So here it is, 1 a.m. I'm having regular contractions. I mean, they're not like transitional contractions by any means, but I was like, sure, I can try that. I'll go back to sleep. So I did. I went back to sleep and I woke up around 6 a.m, and now the contractions were strong and every few minutes, and called her back. And I said, I'm in full active labor now. Can you come? She's like, no, I can't. I'm at another birth. We're heading to the hospital, or whatever it was. She couldn't make it. She called the backup midwife. Midwife came. And by the time she arrived, which was maybe an hour, maybe by like 9 a.m., here we are now, I was in full transition, active labor. And within, like, it wasn't very long that I was pushing. So I went from waking up at probably 6 a.m. and having the baby by, I think it was like 11:30.
Wow.
So
It's pretty quick.
Pretty quick first time labor. I think it was like 7 hours. So maybe it was early afternoon, but it wasn't very long at all. Like, the midwife had only been in the house. I mean, my push time was 2 hours, which is very common for first time moms. So that was the longest part of the labor. It wasn't the dilation. I slept through most of it and just opened. Right?
That's not the normal story, though.
No,
It's
the
not
not at all.
So for people that are listening, that's not the normal story.
It's not the normal story. Normal story is that, you go 10 days overdue. I was a week early. The normal story is that at least 18 to 24 hours for first time moms. So mine was, everything was really smooth. And I think this was the divine going, it's going to get really freaking hard here really fast. We got to make,
so we better give it to you easy now.
We got to give this part of it easy. So the pregnancy was easy, the birth was easy, and the postpartum was easy for my first child, not the story for my second. Right? So the birth, yes, easy. The postpartum, he was one of those quiet babies you could stick under your desk on a boppy and keep working. Like, he was the easy baby because every other part of my life, the veil had been lifted and it got really hard, really quick. I could see all of the red flags. As soon as I had the baby, like, literally I am trying to figure out breastfeeding, and my husband is hitting a tassel on the ceiling. I'm like, well, you better get back to that degree now. Just
look at my face. I'm trying to hold his face. I'm like, don't be mean to my friend. Like,
yeah. So, and really the relationship dissolved pretty quickly after that. I think by the time my son was 2 years old, I was leaving. And in a way, I had to first find a counselor to help me realize I was in an abusive, toxic relationship. She introduced me to a non-denominational religious community. It wasn't even Christian. It was Unitarian Universalism. So everyone believed everything and they just supported each other. So I was like, great, because I met people. I needed community where I could feel supported. And so it was in a place that wasn't going to be offensive to my husband at the time. And it was a place that I could start connecting, because part of the narcissistic emotional abuse was making me alone. I didn't have any friends. I had moved to the state with him and didn't have any connections, any friends. And so I needed to find a community outside of him to be able to leave. And so after building my community and connections there, I had found another woman who was like, if you need to move your stuff into my garage slowly so he won't notice, you can do that. And so that's what I did over like 6 months while I was looking for a place to move into, because I knew it had to be quick. If I was going to leave, I needed a place to land that was going to be safe for me and my son. And I ended up putting it out to the universe. I love doing this. So if you guys, as a manifester, ask the universe exactly what you need. I was like, I need to move in. I want a roommate who has a kid the same age, where child care is going to be easy and that we can tag team mom in it. And so I did. I found a woman who was a single mom. She had a daycare in her house. Our kids were the same age. And she was thrilled to meet another single mom with the same age kid, where I could literally go to work and leave my kid there knowing that he was just at the daycare. So he was under my household every day, regardless of which parent he was with. And so miracles can show up. These opportunities can show up exactly as you need them. When you ask, you have to ask to receive. And I love that part. Like, as soon as I was clear and I was ready for a change, the change was made available.
It's powerful. Okay, so you've lived through it all. So for people who have had abortions and want to get pregnant again, what advice do you have for them? Because I find a lot of them struggle with internal conflict, the shame, the blame, the guilt that comes with abortion, and then the guilt for wanting to have, now that they're ready or they're choosing they want to have a pregnancy and they want to. What advice do you have for them?
Be gentle with yourself. Like, part of it is like, I want you to recognize that your spirit babies know who their parents are. Your spirit babies know your emotional conflicts. Your spirit babies knows what relationships you're in at what time. And some spirit babies are for the mother, some spirit babies are for the father, and some spirit babies are for both. So to give yourself that forgiveness, that this spirit baby, maybe this wants to still come in or has found another relationship to come into, depending on their story and their circumstances. And so when we can respect spirit in this way, when we can respect what the spirit baby wants, we can give ourselves so much more grace in that. Going, they know, they saw, they knew what was happening. And sometimes we need to give ourselves that time to heal,
I agree.
right? We need that time to heal. And I was fortunate to be going through this process, being able to be intuitive, being able to have these conversations with my spirit babies. And part of it was also that I believed in reincarnation. Like, just because I said no doesn't mean they're not still right on my shoulder waiting for the opportunity to come in again. And so
I believe in reincarnation very much too.
right. And this was with coming from a Catholic background. Like, I had to do a lot of work to get from, oh my God, I'm going to hell to
I don't believe in hell anymore.
I don't either. But I was young. Like, I had my baby at 24. So
Yeah.
if I had my abortion at 23, 22, how was I going to move forward? Like, I did some big healing work in midwifery school. I did some big healing work at the birth center that I worked in.
I
And
bet.
part of it was recognizing that there are spirit babies. There is this energy that comes into the room during a birth, and you can't necessarily give words to it. There are angels, there's spirit guides, there's these spirit babies, like, all of this is here. And having that background and going, I know, like I know, like I know that this spirit baby has chosen us as parents, and we will be given another opportunity. And so I definitely feel like both of my previous marriages, they came in with spirit babies that I specifically needed to bring into this world for
That's so
whatever
powerful.
reason. Right. So even though my post divorce from my first marriage was very difficult, we had 10 years of high custody battles, right? I mean, it got ugly a lot of the time, police being called, drama. And now I have this son that I was able to show him exactly what he needed for his life path. So I was able to show him contrast. I was able to show him what a healthy family dynamic looks like. I was able to show him a household without alcohol. I was able to show him what healthy communication looks like by getting a divorce, by remarrying. And so that was my gift to my son. And now he's 17. Granted, he was in counseling since age 3 because I thought it was really important. If he's going to have lots of trauma in his growing up, he was going to need support to process it while it was happening. And so he's very mindful. He's very energetically aware. He's really into psychology. And he also knows I had the perfect parents for what I needed to come into my place at 17 years old and know exactly what I want out of my life, which is
That's
amazing.
at 17. I
At
don't think
17.
I knew what I wanted to get exactly out of my life until after my son was born. And even then, it took like probably not until he was like 18 months. Like I got clarity
Yeah.
after I got Reiki tuned, after I had gone through the womb trauma, I had gone through postpartum, and I was coming out of PPA and PPD.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think to know at 17, like that is fucking the most powerful thing you probably could do for your freaking kid. What a gift you've given him.
And he gets it. He's like, I needed all of that abuse from my dad. I needed to be emotionally beat up again and again so that I can learn how to be in my power and in my strength and learn how to give boundaries.
Well, that's why I wasn't scared to be a mom. I knew what not to do. Like I knew exactly how I wouldn't do it because of my mom.
Yeah.
And also for my dad, I knew exactly how I would show up for my kid because of what he didn't do. So the polarization, the contrast you're speaking of is, yeah, if it wasn't for my dad's, mental and abuse and narcissism, I don't think I would be emotionally available the way I am to my son and being very malleable, like willingness, the immediate willingness to say, I fucked up. I am so sorry. You're 6, but I am so sorry to you. And this is what mommy did wrong. And this is what we're going to do better. And this is how I'm going to change it. I promise, handshake. Like that's our little thing. But, or like just not having a voice with my mom and being like bulldozed completely is, whereas I like pause and I say, this is what we're going to do now. I'm not going to lie to you, but this is what we have to do. We have to get shots today. Or, like we're preparing and like, let me explain why. The whole, like, for me, that's so important. So if you are listening and you're afraid of what you're not going to be able to do or lack or inadequacies or deficiencies, pull on your life and look and be like, what have I learned? Reflect. See what your parents taught you. What do you want to do differently? Maybe there's really great things that they're awesome too. It's all or nothing. My mom, she was an alcoholic growing up and she did a lot of bad things, but you know what she did do? She did PTO or PTA and she did Girl Scouts with me. And I remember that, and reading books. She read a lot of books with me. Do you know what I do now?
Read a lot
I'm
of
a room
books.
mom. I read books with him all the time. I show up for every single volunteer event, almost every, and maybe 2 things a year I don't sign up for. My mom showed up though, and that stuck with me. And those are things I was like, so even if it is not 100% good and there's a lot of bad, I took a way of like, I personally intentionally audited, like, what did I like and what I dislike, and what do I want to bring into my parental relationship with my child? And like that allowed me also to heal. I had like some boundaries and I had some ideas, and then I gave myself permission to ebb and flow and figure it out because he's going to tell me energetically what he needs from me, which is a lot.
Right. Yeah.
My son is
Absolutely.
consuming. I don't know how to explain it. That's why we only have one. So I think it's a blessing, but he's so much more than me. I don't know how to explain it more than that. So, but I love that we're having this conversation because most people don't really get it. But like energetically, he is bigger than me. What he's going to do, and what I'm doing, I feel like I'm creating a movement of Reiki babies. But like for him, I know in my soul, in the bottom of my womb, it is much bigger than what I'm doing.
I think that's
So,
it right there. Like, we have to remember and recognize that they are their own soul. They have their own spiritual path and journey before them, and they chose their parents. And I think oftentimes we forget that. Like, there's a spirit child who specifically said, I want this mother and this father to create this scenario. So I learn these things and have these challenges and these lessons to grow from, so that I can become the adult that now attracts this type of relationship and this kind of education and this type of job opportunities or whatever it is. Like, we're here to experience life,
right.
all of the up and downs. I feel like as a spirit, before we come in, we look at like, hey, here's this opportunity. It's going to be a freaking roller coaster. You're going to learn a lot. Do you want in? And people are signing up for the roller coaster ride.
You don't come to Earth to be idle.
You don't come to Earth to have a vacation. This is not the vacation planet.
So fucking true. Well, on that note, how can people find you on the internet? How can they work with you?
Absolutely. So you can find me at ReikiCafeUniversity.com. If you do handle Reiki Cafe University, you're going to find me on most of the platforms. I spend most of my time in my Reiki Cafe community, is my Facebook group. So if you're interested in learning about Reiki, if you want our free 10-day Catalyze Your Healing opportunity, it's like a little email series, feel free to join our group. You'll get access to that.
We'll
And
link it in the show notes.
And link in the show notes. That would be great. Come check me out. I have my own podcast, Reiki Cafe Radio. We do a lot of coaching, real conversations, limiting belief mindset work. We really want to help people not only understand Reiki and the spiritual understanding of what we've gotten ourselves into down here on earth, but also how we can fully come into our authentic self, our higher self, and do that healing work that's needed so we can move through this lifetime much easier, because we're going to look at everything as an opportunity for a lesson. And once we get that lesson down, we can level up.
Amen for that. Okay, so thank you so much for being here. And until next time, my friends, let the Reiki flow.